Good day, everybody. I hope that you are well and also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 4 English lesson on adjectives and adverbs. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once you've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of English Language Arts. We're doing grade 4, and then we're going to scroll down up until we get to the chapter of adjectives and adverbs. So our chapter is adjectives and adverbs. Our subject is English Language Arts. Grade 4. And the lessons that we are going to be focusing on under the chapter of adjectives and adverbs is to choose between adjectives and adverbs. And we're going to say, is the word an adjective or is the word an adverb? All right. So when it comes to adjectives, right, and adverbs, oh, must I come a bit? Okay, I'll come a bit closer. Okay, so when it comes to adjectives and adverbs, right, so we're doing adjectives and adverbs, and adjectives, right? Can you hear me now? Adjectives are words, or an adjective is a word that tells us about the noun, right? So an adjective, it is a word that tells us about a noun, right? So we have nouns. And when we describe a noun, it's like we're describing a person, we're describing an animal, we're describing a place, or we're describing a thing. And then that is an adjective. Because an adjective, it either tells us about the noun or describes the noun, or we can say it modifies the noun. All right. So adjectives, right, they often tell you what kind or they tell you how many. So, like I say, adjectives, it describes or tells us about a noun. So they can either tell us what kind of noun or how many of those nouns, all right? And we're going to look at a few examples of adjectives before we go to adverbs. And when we tell what kind of noun, right? It's like, for example, saying the girl the girl wears a red dress, right? Let's quickly write it down. So the girl wears a red dress. So now red is our adjective, right? And that tells us about the noun. It tells us what kind of dress. You see, so here it says adjective often tells us what kind. So here, red dress, what kind of dress? So this girl wears a red dress or a blue dress or a beautiful dress. So if you describe something, you can maybe say what kind. And then when we, for example, use how many, then maybe we can say there are two buses or something, but you say how many there are, right? Say, for example, Jody saw three stars in the sky, meaning three tells us how many stars Jody saw, right? So three shows how many. And when it comes to adjectives, it is a word that tells us about the noun. We can say it describes the noun, or we can even say it modifies the noun. And the adjective, it often tells us what kind of noun or how many of that noun, right? And we have an example where we say Jody saw three stars in the sky. Three shows us how many stars, so that shows how many. And then here it says the girl wears a red dress, right? Red tells us what kind of dress the girl wears. So once again, we have adjectives that tells us what kind, and we have adjectives that tells us how many. All right, so now we have adverbs, right? And adverbs, again, on the other hand, they tell us about the verb. Adverbs tells us about the verb. An adverb is a word that tells us about the verb. Adverb, the verb. And adverbs, they often tell you how. Adverbs will tell you when, and adverbs will often tell you where. It's an adverb. They will tell you how, when, or where. And if we look at an example, it says Grace ran quickly. So now you're asking yourself, how did Grace ran? Or how tells how Grace ran. How did Grace run? She ran quickly. So quickly is our adverb that tells you how Grace ran. Quickly. And usually when we have adverbs that tells us how, and then adverbs that tell us how, they end in ly. For example, like quickly, that tells us how Grace ran. Quickly. And when it comes to adverbs, you can't always use ly to tell whether a word is an adverb or adjective, right? Like, for example, we can say she arrives soon. And soon does not end with an ly, but soon tells us when she will arrive. Adverbs. Remember, adverbs to tell us how something is being done or how someone does something, when something happens, or where it happens. That is our adverbs. right, and then we say, Fred has a friendly dog. Fred has a friendly dog, right? Remember with adverbs, right? Adverb can either tell us about the verb, adverbs can tell us about an adjective, or it can tell us about another adverb, right? And in this case, we said that yes, adverbs tell us how they end in ly, right? But sometimes an adjective can also end in ly and it will tell us about the dog. For example, this is an adjective. And it says Fred has a friendly dog. This describes the dog. It tells us what kind of dog Fred has. He has a friendly dog. So that is why sometimes you need to be careful, eh? It doesn't mean because a word ends in ly that it is a adverb, right? You need to see how it is being used in a sentence. Remember, an adverb tells us about the verb. Here it says Grace ran quick. Ran is a verb. That's why quickly tells us about the verb. Here we say Fred has a friendly dog. Dog is a noun. So friendly tells us what kind of dog, what kind of noun. So you need to be careful when it comes to just being able to identify an adverb or an adjective, right? You need to see how it's being used within a sentence, especially when it comes to the ly. All right, I'm glad you're sorted. All right, so now when you once again, before we go on to aplusstudents.ca, we said we have an adverb, right? And adverbs and adjectives. An adverb, it basically tells us about a verb, whereas an adjective, it tells us about a noun. So adjectives tells us about the noun, whereas adverbs, they tell us about the verb, right? It's like we can either say it describes the verb or it just tells us or modifies the verb. That is what we can say. All right. So once again, an adjective is a word that tells us about a noun. Adjectives, they often tell us what kind or they can tell us how many. Whereas an adverb, they tell us about the verb, can tell us about an adjective or another adverb. And adverbs, they often tell us how something is being done, and that usually ends in ly when it happens or where it happens. All right, so now let's go to aplusstudents.ca and we are going to choose between adjectives and adverbs and we're going to say, is the word an adjective or an adverb? All right, the first one, to choose between adjectives and adverbs. So we're going to choose between adjectives and adverbs. All right, no problem. I'll explain again. So we're choosing between an adjective and an adverb. Remember, in order for you to choose between an adjective and an adverb, you first need to know what's an adjective and what's an adverb, right? So an adverb, once again, an adverb, right? It is a word that tells you about a noun. Remember, a noun, it tells us about a person, a place, an animal, or a thing, right? That is a noun. So adjectives, it tells us either about the person, it tells us about an animal, a place, or a thing, right? So adjectives, they often tell us what kind of person, animal, place, or thing, or how many people, animals, places, or things. That's an adjective, right? And here we made an example of an adjective where we said Jody saw 3 stars in the sky. Do you see when it shows how many, right? It can either be a number like 3, 5, 10, or whatever, right? It shows a number, and that will tell us how many there are. So here it says Jody saw 3 stars in the sky, which means that 3, it tells us how many stars Jody saw. And then if we look at an example of an adjective that tells us what kind, then we can say the girl, I'm going to make the same example. The girl wears a red dress. So the girl wears a red dress. So red tells us about the dress. It tells us what kind of dress the girl wears. The girl wears a red dress. Red describes or tells us about the dress. We can even say the girl wears a long dress, wears a short dress, wears a blue dress, wears a black dress, wears a maxi dress, as long as you're describing or telling us about the verb, right? Yes. Then we have an adverb. An adverb, it's a word that tells us about a verb. And adverbs, they often tell us how something is being done or how it happens, when and where. And adverbs that tells us how, they often end in ly. For example, quickly. And here we have an example that says Grace ran quickly. So quickly is the adverb. Gently is the adverb. So the adverb quickly, it tells us how Grace ran. And remember, when you try to see the difference between an adjective and an adverb, remember an adjective, it tells us about a noun. You need to identify the noun within that sentence, and then you see, okay, what tells me about the noun? And that is the adjective. When it comes to adverbs, identify the verb. Like, for example, ran. Identify the verb first. Then you can tell us, okay, this tells me about the verb. For example, quickly tells me how she ran, because ran is the verb. Arrives is the verb. She arrives soon. Soon tells us when she arrives. Right? So you need to, with an adjective, you need to first identify the noun. Once you've identified the noun, now we need to say what word tells us about the noun, and that is how we can get the adjective. Once you found the adjective, now you can say, okay, it tells me what kind of noun it is, or it tells me how many of the things it is. And the same with adverbs, right? Adverbs, you first identify the verb, then you get the word, for example, like quickly or soon, that tells us about the verb, that will either tell us how something is being done, when it's being done, or where it's being done. And not all adverbs end in ly. But then again, also we get adjectives that also ends in ly. All right, so now let's look at a few activities or sentences before we go to our test. It says, during the summer months in California, rain is. So usually during They saying that during summer in California, rain is unlikely, right? It is unlikely. If we look at the next sentence, it says we need to use the word or choose a word that best describes the noun in bold. The noun in bold. Mrs. Johnston's enormous German Shepherd is actually a what dog? We need to describe the dog. We need to say what kind of dog it is. Do we say it is do we say it is a gentle dog, or do we say it is a gently dog? Do we say it is a gentle dog or a gently dog? Which one is correct? Gentle dog or gently dog? Look at the sentence again. See how the sentence is written. Is it a gently dog or a gentle dog? And if we were to say what kind of dog it is, and then we can say it is a gentle dog, right? Something is done gently. I gently rub the dog's fur. You gently do an action, right? But here it says he is a gentle dog, right? So a gentle dog. So well done. Gentle is correct. Laura worries too much about being cold. Laura worries too much about being cold. Do we say a selfish person, or do we say a selfishly person? So do we say selfish person or selfishly person? Which one? She is worried about being cold. Do we say a selfish person or selfishly person? Do we say Laura worries about being called a selfish person or selfishly person? Selfish or selfishly? All right, so we can then say Laura worries too much about being called a selfish person. And selfish is an adjective. It describes the person, it describes the noun. That is why they say choose the word that best describes the noun. Laura is the person. All right. All right. So now we're going to our test, right? Where we are going to choose either between adjectives and between an adverb. Remember, you need to look at how something is being done, right? All right. Here it is. We need to choose the adverb because here it says choose the word that best describes the verb, right? The action. Pam behaved selfish or selfishly and should be ashamed of herself. Remember, there's a difference between selfish and selfishly. It's the same way, but word, but I mean like how it's being done. One is an adjective and one is an adverb. So Pam behaved selfish, or do we say Pam behaved, sorry, selfishly? Pam behaved selfish, option one, or selfishly, option two. And if we were to choose the correct option, right? And then we can say Pam behaved, yes, selfishly, selfishly, and should be ashamed of herself. Well done. Selfishly is correct because if we had to say selfish, then we would say she's a selfish person. It's not the action that she's doing. We're describing the person. But if we describe the action, then we say selfishly. But if we describe the person, then we say selfish. Right? All right. Did you measure the correctly amount of sugar for brownies, or did you measure the correct amount of sugar for the brownies? Which one is correct? Did you measure the correctly amount of sugar for the brownies, or did you measure the correct amount of sugar for the brownies? Correct or correctly? So, did you measure the correctly amount of sugar for the brownies, or did you measure the correct amount of sugar for the brownies? Which one is correct? And if we were to choose the correct option, then we would say, did you measure the correct amount of sugar for the brownies? So correct is the correct answer. The young boy, do we say shyly hid in the bedroom until the guest left? Or the young boy shy hid in the bedroom until the guests left? So something that how did he do it? Shyly or shy? Shyly or shy? And if we were to choose the correct option, right? And then we can say the boy, option one, shyly hid in the bedroom until the guests arrived. It shows us how he did it. But if we were to say the boy like is shy, then this will describe the boy being shy. But if we say how he did something, then we can say shyly. So well done. Shyly is correct. Miss Johnston's enormous German Shepherd is actually a gently dog, option one, or gentle dog, option two. We are basically describing the dog, gentle or gently. So is it a gentle dog or gently dog? And if we were to choose the correct answer, right, to basically tell us about the dog, and then we can say it was option two, a gentle dog, right? Gentle dog. Gabby answered all the questions on the history test. Do we say Gabby correctly answered all the questions on the history test? Or do we say Gabby correct answered all the questions on the history test? She correctly answered or correct answered all the all the questions on the history test. Which one is correct? correctly or correct. And we can say Gabby correctly answered all the questions. Yes, correctly is correct. Well done. Correctly, she answered all the questions. Well done. Now it says we're going to say is the word an adjective or an adverb. So a word will be given, right? A word will be given. They're going to underline either the verb or the noun, and then the adverb or the adjective will be in bold. So we need to say is it an adjective or an adverb. It says a sneaky raccoon stole our cat's food. Raccoon is the noun. Sneaky. Is sneaky an adjective or is it an adverb? Sneaky raccoon, that tells us about the raccoon. What kind of raccoon? It is a sneaky raccoon. And if we were to say what kind of raccoon it is, then we say sneaky raccoon is an adjective because it's telling us about the raccoon, which is a noun. Here it says Jennifer spoke softly. Spoke is a verb. Spoke softly as she comforted her friend. So softly, is that an adjective or is it an adverb? Softly, an adjective or an adverb? Softly. All right, and if we were to identify if that is an adjective or is it an adverb, right? And then we can say it is an adverb. So this is an adverb because it tells us how she spoke. All right, so now we're going to our test where we are going to say is the word an adjective or is the word an adverb? It says, is the word in bold an adjective or an adverb? Hector plays in the shallow end of the pool. Plays. The word in bold describes the word that is underlined. Shallow end. Is it an adjective or is it an adverb? Plays in the shallow end. So Hector plays in the shallow end of the pool. Is that an adjective or an adverb? And if we were to choose the correct option, right, we can say end is actually a noun. It is an adjective. Shallow is an adjective that tells us about the end. That shallow end. It's either the deep end or the shallow end. Chewy candy always sticks to my teeth. Chewy candy always sticks to my teeth. Is that an chewy? Is that an adjective or is that an adverb? Chewy candy. Is that an adjective or an adverb? And if we were to identify if that is either an adjective or if it's an adverb, right? And then we can say chewy candy is an adjective because it's either sweet candy, chewy candy, or something. Okay, it's the last one. It says Lexi sees clearly with her new glasses. Sees clearly. So clearly, is this an adjective or is it an adverb? Lexi sees clearly with her new glasses. Sees, is that an adjective or an adverb? And if we were to choose either an adjective or if it's an adverb, and then we can say that Lexi sees clearly with her new glasses, it's an adverb. All right, so this is now the end of our lesson. We said an adjective, it tells us about the noun. Adjectives can either tell us what kind or how many. An adverb tells us about a verb, and adverbs either tell us how, where, or when something happens. So this is the end of our lesson. Thank you very much, grade 4s, for joining the class, and I really hope you're going to have an amazing weekend further. Goodbye.